Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about Desiree's baby. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, this work by Kate Chopin, it's very sad. It teaches us a lot about love, romance, race and culture, and American culture, and um, things that we value within the world. It's a very interesting story, but it's also a very sad story. Um, let's just talk about what happens, and let's talk about the summary. Basically, what happens in this work is that there's a baby by the name of Desiree, a toddler, and she, at a young age, of course, she's dropped off at the Valmond household. Now, Mrs. Valmond and Monsieur Valmond, they're these white individuals, and Desiree is also a white baby. They all look white. At first, this looks like just a match made in heaven because Mr. Valmond and Mrs. Valmond, they can't have children of their own, and then a white baby, a white toddler girl, just lands on their doorstep, and I mean, it starts great. That's wonderful. Now this is during the time of slavery. This is not, it's not something written in modern times at all. It's in the time of slavery, so they just keep the toddler. They don't call any authorities. They don't do anything like that. It's just kind of like a gift from God, as they say within the short story. And they raised the child up until its 18th birthday. And then Desiree, a man by the name of Armand Bigsby, comes in, and Bigsby, it tells us that just like a gunshot, going off, Bigsby falls in love with Desiree, and he proposes, and she says yes. They get married, and they have a child, a little baby boy. And so at first, this short story seems simple. It seems, just amazing for Desiree, for the Valmond family, for Bigsby, because everything is great, everything is happening wonderfully. But for me, from my own personal perspective, whenever things are happening so smoothly in something, I always have a problem with it because life is not smooth. Um, Life is not smooth by any sense of the word, and that's something I get from literature, from reading a lot of books, is that life is not smooth, and it's never smooth for anyone. Life has a series of crevices, of cracks, of pitfalls that throws us off course, and oftentimes makes us misstep, right? But Desiree's baby, the short story, at the beginning, it seems like everything is perfect, everything is right where it needs to be, and that made me feel uncomfortable. The first thing that really got me, I mean, from the beginning, I was a little bit nervous because taking a baby in without asking any questions, without asking about its heritage, that's something that made me nervous at the beginning of the short story. I mean, these parents, the Valman family, they just take the baby because they wanted a baby. When you want something real bad, sometimes you won't ask certain questions because it's just so convenient for the Valman family, and so they just take the baby. And so they take this baby, and they don't ask about its heritage or what problems this might cause for our family in the future. They just take the baby, and that has some problems right there. But the story goes on, and the other thing that really got me to take a step back was when the story says that just like a gunshot going off, like a quick hit, um, Armand Bigsby, he just falls in love with Desiree. I mean, he never loved her between the ages of I don't know, 13 to 17. Uh, just when she turned 18, and he had a look at her, and he was like, I'm in love, and they got hitched, they got married, and their life began. And this is where the story gets worse. We're later told within the short story that Mrs. Valman goes to see Desiree and the baby. She's excited. Her daughter had a baby. her daughter's married, and she's very proud. And basically, we're told that when Mrs. Valmont shows up at Desiree's house, we're told that the place is not as beautiful as she would think. The place is not as wonderful as you would think. And things just start getting worse and worse. Now, we know that Bigsby, his family always owned slaves, and he treated his slaves badly. But once he got married to Desiree and Bigsby was in love and he had a child, he treated the slaves kinder. He was, nice to them. But what happens is after 3 months of the baby being born, they start to understand that the baby is black. Now, we're talking about it during the time of slavery. So if you were a quarter black, they consider you as black. If you were half black, if you're a mixed race, they consider you as just black. If you if you have the heritage, you are black. So the baby had no chance. And this revealed a lot of things about the family because, even Mrs. Valmont, when she shows up, she says this is not the baby. And this is very shocking because that is the baby. But the reason why she says, this is not the baby is because it's black. And they're like, and Mrs. Valmont, she's like, you're white, your husband's white, why is this baby black? And so everyone is in a state of shock because neighbors are coming to see the kid. They're understanding that, perhaps, Desiree is black because they know about Bigsby's heritage. They know his family is white, so everyone's blaming Desiree. They're saying she's black, and this woman is not. She's not black. She looks white. She's even, she's whiter than her husband. But everybody's saying you must have black heritage in your blood because your baby's black or your baby looks dark, and the story just gets bad. It really gets bad, to the point where Bigsby falls out of love with his wife. He ends up kicking Desiree out with the child. He stops loving Desiree. I mean, which is, the same way that he was struck and he fell in love with Desiree is the same way that he was struck and he fell out of love with Desiree. And he kicks Desiree out. And, the story it doesn't get better. It doesn't get better at all. Desiree gets kicked out. The baby gets kicked out. He kicks out his own wife and kids because he feels like they're black, even though that, his wife looks whiter than him. And, his son is just a little bit darker. He's mixed. And throughout the whole story, you can see some comparisons. I mean, the baby is compared to other slaves, so they can look at different skin color. It's compared to, lighter slaves, and they're just trying to see, is this baby black or not? And at first they tried to ignore it, but the more the story went along is, the more that they saw that the baby was black. And when everybody accepted this conclusion, Desiree writes back home to her mother, and Mrs. Valmont says, come home. She goes home. Desiree decides to go home, and she takes the baby, she takes herself, and she starts to walk home. And Armand Bigsby, he stays at home by himself, and pretty much this is a divorce. And the sad thing is that Desiree doesn't go home. Desiree doesn't go home. Desiree commits suicide. She pretty much walks into the bayou or a swampy area, barefoot, with her baby in her arm, which is very dark and very grueling, very grim, because this woman is white. She is white. We don't know her heritage. We're not told her heritage, but she is definitely white. Again, she's lighter. Her skin is brighter or lighter than her husband, and oh my goodness, she has gray eyes. She's a white woman with a lighter skinned baby. She ends up committing suicide, and also murder because she kills her baby too. Because the life that her baby was going to have was just not going to be right. You know, if she went back home to her mother, I mean, her mother would take her back in with open arms, but at the same time, she probably couldn't get married, to another white individual. Her baby would have been considered black, and if you're considered black and during the age of slavery, you're not gonna have much of a life. Um, and so she's like, I don't want to go through all that. I don't want my baby to go through all that, and she kills herself, and the baby also. And then by the end of the short story, Amidal Bixby, he's just burning all the baby clothes, her stuff, Desiree stuff. He burns it all. He burns all the marriage things. And what's very dark here, what's very sad, is that Amidal Bixby finds out that he was black, that he is black, because his mother was black, and his mother hid the fact that he was black to him all his life because they wanted him to think that he was white and that he had no black blood in his veins, but he did. And that doesn't change anything for him because he goes along burning all Desiree's stuff. He wasn't willing to give up his life of luxury of being white for his wife and kids. So, he finds out he's black. I mean, he looks white, but he has black blood in his veins because he found his mother's letter. The letter just pretty much it's a letter where his mother and his father were talking, and the mother was just kind of like rejoicing that Amidal Bixby would never find out that his mother is black. It's interesting, and she died in France, so his parents, went to and fro from France to America. And we know that, the same level of racism and how slavery was done in the United States, it doesn't compare the same way to the racism and because Europe was on the road to abolishing slavery way before America was. So it's a tough story because Amidal Bixby finds out he's black. He finds out about his heritage. He pretty much drives his wife and child to die or to their death. And then he burns all their stuff and he goes on living with his life. Desiree and the baby, they died. It's a very tough story. Now, let's talk about the significance, the deeper meaning, the analysis portion. Number one thing is that it becomes very ludicrous and laughable to figure out if someone is black or not. I mean, if you're looking at me, I'm black. I mean, my skin gives it away. A he, a ha ha. My skin gives it away. I can't hide from it. My hair is tough hair. I've broken a few combs on it. There's no lying about it. My pigmentation is fully, proudly out for all to see. I can't hide it one bit. But Desiree, she's fully white. Her skin proudly says it all. She can't hide from that either. But Amidal Bixby, he is black. He looks white. He's both. He's mixed. And yet he drove his wife to kill herself because she was blamed for the baby being black. And I mean, that says a lot about the times. That says a lot about human history. I think for only now in the 21st century, or maybe the latter 20th century, women started to become their own individuals. Before the time that we're in now, women all around the world, they were blamed for everything. If you couldn't have kids, it was the woman's fault. If there was anything wrong with the pregnancy, it was the woman's sins. Everything was blamed on the woman. And Desiree was blamed for this, and she was driven to pay the price. Bixby was the true culprit. It's because of him that the baby looks, darker, because he's black. Um, so, I mean, that says a lot about him. That says a lot about the time. Yes, we know about the social constructs during the time of slavery. We know what it was like for black people. We know that you had to stay within, you had to be white. If you weren't white, you were a slave or serving somebody. Um, so you can understand the pressure that Al Bixby was on, why he wanted to remain, keep his status. But at the same time, you see the how ludicrous it is because it becomes really hard after a while when races are mingling and mixing and people are marrying different people. It becomes really hard to tell who's black and who's white. And so I can assure you that during the time of slavery, a lot of white people were killed because they thought that they were black. I mean, they could have killed, hundreds, perhaps thousands across the United States, of white people because of the fact that, they wanted to keep everything white and make sure that the slaves stayed slaves. So a lot of innocent people like Desiree died because of this. So slavery, and one thing I take away from this short story, it didn't just ruin the lives of slaves and black people. It also ruined the lives of a lot of white people too. A lot of people suffered because of it. But at the same time, there's this brutality of a father, giving up on his son, just because that he looks darker. So that's another thing to take in. For me, I would say another thing is how love is portrayed within this short story. The love that is portrayed in the short story is just very fascinating. Because Desiree's parents, right, the Valmons, they just fell in love with Desiree because she was left at their doorstep, and at the same time, Aminah Bixby falls in love with Desiree at her doorstep because he just saw her. So there's a case that Aminah Bixby never really truly loved Desiree, because I personally, I don't believe in love at first sight. I think it's quite ridiculous. I believe in lust at first sight. That definitely exists, but not love. Love is something that is nurtured and built. So that says a lot about their love story. I don't think they truly loved each other. I think Desiree married Aminah Bixby because she didn't know anything about her heritage and her life. So she decided to marry Aminah Bixby. The same thing. I think Aminah Bixby just saw a pretty woman, and he decided to have a family with her. The Valmons, they lost a lot because they really truly loved Desiree as their daughter. So yeah, I mean, life for women sucked. It just sucked in the 20th century. It sucked, in all the times from the 20th century and everything that came before that. Life sucked for women all around the world because you had no rights. You had to do whatever the man said, whatever your husband said. You had, you didn't have that many choices when it came to having an identity. And you had to do whatever you could to escape the treachery of the world. And this white woman by the name of Desiree, she ends up paying the price for it. And that's very sad. That is extremely very sad. But that is my look on Desiree's Baby. That is my perspective and my summary analysis on it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, or comment. And I'll see you guys in my next video.